ever started out trying to solve one problem and then accidentally solved a completely different one? That happens to the main character in the fairy tale I'm sharing today, a lovely, silly little folktale from China called The Paper Bride.
Fucked up fairy tales with Liz.
Ding! Once upon a time, there was a young man, a peasant, who found himself completely bankrupt because of his addiction to gambling. This was pretty embarrassing for him, and his family was ashamed of him. Plus, with no money, he was missing his favorite, though problematic, hobby. So he figured out a way to scam his relatives out of some money. Guess what, everyone? I am getting married! His family, not about to make themselves look bad by skipping out on a tradition, sent him some money for congratulations. But then they were asking when the wedding feast would take place. But for now, the young man just put off that info, and he returned to his bad habits and promptly lost all of that money he'd scammed. So now he found himself in double the trouble because not only was he broke again, but his relatives were knocking down his door wondering when his wedding was going to happen. So he asked a local artist to create a fake bride for him out of paper. I have to imagine that the guy created this three-dimensional, maybe piñata type of bride, but it's also pretty funny to imagine that he just made her a 2D paper doll. Like a life-size cardboard cutout. The peasant picked up his paper bride after dark to carry her home, but on the way back he had to take a piss. He was passing by a graveyard, so he leaned the doll up against a tombstone and relieved himself. And that being done, he hoisted the doll on his back and headed back home, noting that she seemed to be kind of a heavy thing for a doll made of paper. The next morning, the peasant was shocked to find his uncles were visiting and receiving tea, and not only that, they were being served by a very beautiful young woman. His uncles congratulated him on securing such a beautiful and personable wife. So the peasant, of course, played along until he was alone with the girl. Are you a ghost? You have to tell me if you're a ghost, otherwise it's ghost entrapment. I'm sort of a ghost, but it's more complicated than that. Remember last night when you stopped to take a pee break on your way home? Yes. Well, you pissed on my grave. Oh. Yeah. This is awkward. I would be very offended, but the paper doll you leaned against my tombstone gave me an out. See, I died recently, but I was allowed to inhabit the doll to finish some business here on Earth. If you let me live as your wife for the next month, I'll find you a true bride before I go. Seems like more than I deserve, but you know what? I'll take it. Meng Yao looked pretty damn good for an undead woman, and the peasant escorted her home on his arm so she could greet her family. I'm not dead! She's just engaged! Yay! So the young couple began preparing for this supposed wedding, and during that time Meng Yao took up residence with her family again. We zoom ahead 1 month later to her last night on Earth, and she decided to share her bed that night with her little sister like they used to do when they were kids. In the middle of the night, Meng Yao's sister woke herself up when she accidentally kicked Meng Yao, and she leaned over to apologize and then discovered that Meng Yao was once again a paper bride. Everyone took the news surprisingly well. You should be more careful, young lady. You kicked a hole in your sister. You're more disturbed by me kicking her than by the fact that she turned into paper? We're not disturbed. We're just disappointed. Oh no, disappointed is so much worse. The family was puzzled and sad, and they also were feeling a little guilty because, as far as they knew, the fiancé of Meng Yao was not going to be expecting a paper lady. So they had this idea. Hello, sir. Last night I kicked my recently undead sister and she turned into paper, but I was wondering if you'd like to marry me instead. Huh? Well, I'm extremely disappointed that your sister turned into paper, but I guess you'll do. And so the peasant was able to save face with his own family having an actual bride to marry, and Meng Yao was able to rest peacefully, having finished whatever business she needed to attend to back on Earth. Do we think this all solved the peasant's gambling problems? Probably not, but I guess we'll have to wait for a sequel. I read today's tale in a lovely little book called The Dragon Daughter and Other Linland Fairy Tales, edited by Juwen Zhang. Linland was a conglomerate of writers in the early 20th century who wanted to do for China what the Brothers Grimm had done for the Germanic states in collecting folklore. They collected over 1,000 folk tales. This volume has 42 of them. It's a really entertaining collection, and I highly recommend it, as well as other books in the Oddly Modern Fairy Tales series published by Princeton University Press. Not sponsored, I just love them. Take a quick look at this information, as things have sort of stagnated and I would love to see an upswing again. And then take a look at this information because it's coming up real soon and I would love to see you if you're in the area. But whether I see you there or here, I will definitely see you for the next Fucked Up Fairy Tale.